Happy Sunday and happy Mother's Day. My name is Aaron Demaster and I'm the pastor of Centerpoint Church. If you've never heard of Centerpoint Church, we are a new church launching in Fond du Lac this fall. Now, we are a church that's set to be relevant, real, and positive. We believe that as a Christian church, we want to have Jesus at the center, and we want our services to be worshipful. But we also believe that church can still be fun, and it still can be relatable and meaningful all at the same time. Now, over the course of these next 4 weeks, we want to give you a taste of what you can expect from Centerpoint. We want to give you a sample of what the messages are like, the tone, the vibe, and all of that. So we are actually in our second week of doing this, and what you'll get from me now is a 20 minutes or so message that'll help you align your life better with God, without it being a snooze fest, or at least I hope not. Today, we are continuing our series that we've been calling Unleashed, and the reason we're doing this series is I feel like all of us have been leashed, right? We've been stuck at home, but we are getting so close to being released, to going back to some normalcy of interacting with others. So as we transition soon, we want to talk about how we can be unleashed for good, for better, and in a stronger way. And God actually gives us some direction on how to do this with certain areas of our lives using the Bible. So today, we're talking about being unleashed by being more influential. So to be unleashed, to use our influence for good or for something more than ourselves, for something that is more than just temporary. I don't know a more fitting attribute that fits to talk about on Mother's Day than influence. There's a quote that comes to mind, and it's from Sarah Josepha Hale, and it says, "No influence is so powerful as that of the mother." That is such a true statement. Mothers are influential, and there's power behind that. Mothers are influential whether it's to their children or to the people around them. I'm learning that mothers are actually quite influential to their spouses. Now, for those that don't know, my wife Sydney and I, we are expecting, and it could be happening at any day now. And as we've been in this developing process of becoming parents and my wife becoming a mother, she has turned into quite an influential developing mother. For example, she has had some influence on determining every meal we eat from now on. Yeah, somehow that influence has happened. She also has influence to determine every placement of a heavy thing in our house right now. She also has influence of whether or not I'm making a random trip to Quick Trip or wherever to pick up salty chips, pickles, or ice cream of some sort. Hypothetically speaking on all of those, of course. She also has influence of whether our night is full of excitement or full of discomfort for all of us. My wife has turned into a mother of influence, and our baby hasn't even arrived yet. Now, all jokes aside, mothers do have an immense amount of influence. What they want to teach their children, what they want to model for their kids, what they want to show others they prioritize, how they love, and what their family prioritizes and spends their time and resources into. Yet many of these decisions, they are not limited to just mothers. We all have influence in these things. We all have the ability to make a difference or sway a decision or model a behavior or live out a value that we fully believe in. That influence, it could reach thousands or it could reach one. That influence could be from a podium or it could be from a small silent gesture. It could be from a 5-second action. It could be from a lifetime of consistency. We all have influence. Now, I don't know about you, but as I think about the concept of influence and I think about being unleashed into the public, I think I can be better with my influence by making a difference in the world using my influence and leading others to God using my influence. How about you? Can you max out your influence to help others by using your influence in an unleashed way? Well, there are a couple people in the Bible we're going to talk about today who use their influence to make an impact to God. And I think there are some things that we can take away from what they did. Our story that we're going to talk about today is probably a familiar one to you if you grew up in the church. If you didn't, you'll slowly learn this story as I'm going to tell the whole thing. But in this story, you might recognize a character or two, and then there's going to be some people that you've never heard of that also all played a part in this influential story. Now, our story, how it starts is God's people, the Hebrew people, are being enslaved by the Egyptians. They're enslaved by the Egyptians, but as they are in this slavery position, they are populating rapidly. I guess like work hard and play hard is kind of the mentality behind that, but yeah, so they're populating like crazy. And the king of that time, the Pharaoh, he notices this and says in Exodus 1:15-17, he says, "Then Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, gave this order to the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, when you help the Hebrew women as they give birth, watch as they deliver. If the baby is a boy, kill him. If it is a girl, let her live." But because the midwives feared God, they refused to obey the king's orders. They allowed the boys to live too. So these women, these two midwives, they chose not to kill babies. Well, this slows the process. It slows the process, but shortly after, the Pharaoh realizes that boys are still showing up, and he allows anyone to kill newborn males, Hebrew newborn males. Well, during this time, our story focuses in on a newborn, a Hebrew woman who just had this baby. And the scriptures say that this woman, she notices that this baby is special. Now, I'm guessing like that's every parent, like their baby is special, but she notices there's something special about this baby. It says it in Exodus 1:2. It says, "She saw that he was a special baby and kept him hidden for 3 months." She had hid him for the time she felt she could, and eventually, like, I'm guessing she just had this feeling that 3 months is up. This is the time I need to do something different. I don't know if you've ever had that before where you're like, I need to do something different. Something needs to change. I know I definitely have. Now, I'm not a father, but hiding a newborn, a 1 month, 2 month, 3 month old, whatever it is, sounds insane, right? I'm guessing it's not easy to hide a baby that's under 3 months, and I'm guessing it's not much easier after 3 months. But she does this. And who am I to say like whether or not that's possible or not? I'm just a father being influenced by my developing mom or developing wife as a mother. Let's continue. Anyways, well, at 3 months, she puts this baby in a basket and sends it down the Nile River. Then this baby, it starts floating down the river, and the Bible says this baby's sister actually is watching it float down. Well, then it gets to the king or the Pharaoh's daughter of that time, so a princess, who happens to come down to the Nile at that exact time and stumbles upon this basket and this baby. And the baby does this cry, like a cute cry, I guess. Hold on. A cute cry? Like, is that a thing? Like, a cute, like, it's cute and you're like, ooh, like, this is a cute cry and I feel for this baby. Well, apparently the baby does this cry and this woman feels for this baby. All cries sound like headaches to me, but apparently this cry wasn't. This woman feels for this baby at the time. And as she's feeling for this baby, the baby's sister runs to this woman and wants to do something for this baby boy. So she asks this princess, hey, do you want me to take care of this baby for you? Do you want me to take it to the Hebrew mother so that she can nurse it and care for it for you? And the princess is like, yeah, do that for me. I'll pay for you to have this Hebrew woman nurse it. And then as this child develops over the time, this princess adopts this boy and names him Moses. Well, Moses is then trained up, brought up, and taught in the ways of the Egyptians. And his story continues to say that he becomes the person who rescues God's people, these servants or slaves, from the Egyptians over numerous trials and through a lot of convincing from God to have Moses do this. But he ends up being the person who leads thousands to be a nation for God. It's an amazing story. And there's so much more to it that you got to check out by reading Exodus. It's in the first couple chapters. But for our conversation on influence, there's so much in this story that we can pull out to see how God used multiple people and their influence for good to eventually rescue thousands of others. What's amazing about this story, though, is God uses multiple people, all at different levels of notability. We saw the midwives, we saw the sister, we saw the mother, we saw the princess, all these different levels of notability who all influenced the situation. Yet without one of them, this story could be completely different. Well, God tends to do this. In 1 Corinthians 1:28 it says, "Isn't it obvious that God deliberately chose men and women that the culture overlooks and exploits and abuses? Chose these nobodies to expose the hollow pretensions of somebodies." God uses nobodies, average, everyday people like you and honestly like me too. Before we talk about how this story relates to us, I want to tell you one more historical story that has happened to our nation, and it was in the 1960s. In 1960, there was a 6-year-old girl named Ruby Bridges. Now, this girl was an African-American girl who, around that time that she was born, the decision of Brown versus the Board of Education decided that segregating schools was unconstitutional. Yet even as Ruby was a 6-year-old, almost 6 years after this decision happened, there was still significant segregation happening, especially in the southern states, Louisiana, where she was located. Well, Ruby, along with 5 other students, go through this testing and they qualify to be a student, to be someone that starts this integration process. Well, she qualifies, yet her family doesn't want her to go. Her father is so hesitant on this. He doesn't really want it to happen. So her mother finally convinces the husband and says, this is huge for the civil rights movement. This could be huge for so much more in the future. So she sacrifices for the sake of others. Well, as they make this decision, 2 of the other students that qualified for this decide to stay at their old school. And then the other 3 decide they're not going to the same school Ruby is. They're going to a different one. Well, that leaves Ruby all alone to be this one African-American girl to go to this school to start the integration process all alone. Well, the first day of school comes around and Ruby is walking in with her mother, and they're actually escorted by federal marshals. And as they are getting to the school, Ruby describes what she sees as Mardi Gras, except instead of people cheering, there's chaos happening. People are furious. Well, during this lead up, white families were pulling their kids from this school. They didn't want to be a part of this. All the teachers except one refused to teach Ruby. So on the first day, Ruby walks in and she doesn't even make it to the classroom because there's just too much chaos going on in the school. She spends the entire day in the principal's office. The second day comes around. They're escorted with the federal marshals. They walk into what is about the school doors, but they notice a boycott. Nobody's entering the school. Now, at this boycott, something happens. Finally, this white man and his daughter say, you know what? I just want the right and I want the privilege of taking my child to school. And he decides to break the boycott by going into the school, and others follow. And it breaks the boycott. A few days later, other white parents, they begin bringing their children back to school, and the protests begin to subside, and the schools become integrated. Now, in both of our stories, we see significant influence, but a trail of small influential decisions that lead up to what we remember about these stories. I think there are significant things that we can take away to be better, to influence better. Meaning to make big things happen in the world and make big things happen with our relationship with God and to lead others to God. Whether we are the Moses figure in a story or we're the midwife, we all have influence. Now, the first thing we can pull from our stories is we see there's sacrifice that happens. The midwives, they chose not to kill babies, even when the Pharaoh said to. That meant sacrificing their safety, their comfort, maybe even their job. Moses, he made a decision to follow God and rescue his people even though he had zero interest in doing it. He sacrificed his desires. The mother and father in Ruby's story, they made the decision to let Ruby go even though they didn't really want to initially. They sacrificed for the greater good. To be influential for God, we need to sacrifice some of what we describe as comfort or normal. We have to sacrifice. Romans 12:2, it says, "Don't copy the behaviors and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect." Be transformed and change the way you think. Think influence, not comfort. Think change, not safety. So what is the sacrifice that maybe you need to make to be more influential? For me, a while back, a story comes to mind of when I used to hang out with this group of friends that we were pretty vulgar. We were pretty vulgar. We would swear. We'd be pretty nasty to each other, and we'd be pretty nasty to other people of the things we'd say. And it would lead to some heated disagreements, some intense verbal feuds that we'd get into it. Now, I don't know why we did this. This was just the culture we've created. And it was my friends, right? But we still had these verbal feuds. But for me, whenever I felt personally attacked or felt someone was coming after me, I was a fighter and still am sometimes. I'm a fighter. I'm already strategizing my next thing I was going to say, or I was already thinking of how I'm going to get this person back or the comeback I'm going to come with. I was a fighter. Yet as I started to reflect on that, I started to think, if I'm going to take my faith serious as a Christian, I can't participate in this. I can't talk poorly of others, and I can't be this fighter that always fights back and is thinking revenge with my friends. I don't know if you can relate to that, but it's something I've struggled with. No, this was a sacrifice of me choosing to do this. It was a sacrifice of me not fitting in with my friends anymore. Well, I started to do this with my friends, and they noticed that I wasn't participating, and all of a sudden I became the target, for all of the verbal feuds, always. And it was even on my faith and some of the things that I believed in. Yet I'm brainstorming of already how I'm going to come back with something good or get revenge. Yet in my mind I said, I have to sacrifice this. I can't fight back. So I chose to be silent. I chose not to fight back. And finally, a year or so later, I overheard one of my friends say to somebody else, "Yeah, Aaron just takes it. It's very unique, and the other person is just rude and disrespectful, yet Aaron will just take it." And to me, that was a positive. It hit me. It worked. It was worth it to stick to my decision to hopefully influence my friends. Now, I sacrificed my pride, and honestly, I sacrificed having the fun banter with my friends and the fun feuds that we used to have. Now, I wasn't perfect then in that situation that made this happen, and I'm not perfect now at doing these things either, but that was a sacrifice that I did to point my friends to God, to be influential with my friends. What is a sacrifice you need to make to be influential? Is it whether you participate in something or not? Is it whether you choose to go to something or not? Or whether you say something in a situation or not? What's your decision that you feel is right and that you need to stand up for even when it's really tough? So that's our first one. The second thing we see is timing. Timing is important in our stories. Moses' mother, she waited for the right time. 3 months was the time she felt was right. The white father and child, they walked in and made a statement to break the boycott at the right time. There's a timing for things to maximize influence. In a psalm, they talk about waiting for God's timing and to use your bravery and courage as you're waiting for this timing. Now, it talks about in Psalm 27:14, it says, "Wait patiently for the Lord. Be brave and courageous. Yes, wait patiently for the Lord." What's the time that you should act to maximize your influence? Are you praying that God gives you that time and shows you that time and gives you bravery and courage as you're leading up to that time? Are you waiting to maybe share your faith with someone? Or are you waiting to have that really hard discussion that you've been putting off? Or are you seeking the best time to make this big change, whether it's work related or family related or faith related? Wait patiently for God and have Him give you the time. Pray for that. Pray for Him to show you the right timing. The third thing we see in our stories is God uses the positions we are in. The woman who adopted Moses was a princess, right? She had the ability to be able to save this baby. Ruby, she tested high enough to be able to be a student to help the integration process happen. The midwives, they were in a position to not kill babies. What's your position? What's your position that you can do something influential with? Are you a parent that can influence your child to have positive values? Are you a teen that can influence a club or a team or a group and have them maybe be more inclusive of others? Are you a manager of people that can influence your workers to show that you really care for them and that care is important? Are you a customer that can influence workers by showing them that you actually treat others well? We all have positions of influence, of positivity, of care, of support, and of Christian attributes. And we can share that influence of those things. Whether it's through simply a smile, through making a big speech or a small speech, or making this giant move that you've been preparing for a long time. Yet Jesus uses anybody. Jesus chose to influence certain people, and they weren't the heavy hitters. They were everyday people like fishermen, accountants, business owners, the working class, again, like you and like me. And He used them to influence the world to follow Him. Are you doing that? Are you using the position that God has given you to influence others? The last thing I want to point out from our stories is there was consistency. There is consistency. Ruby, she continued to go to school after this all happened, after her big moment. The princess, she continued to care for Moses after she made the decision to care for him. Moses, he continued to lead and persuade Pharaoh to release his people, even though it took countless times. Without consistency of any of these people that are trying to influence the world, change doesn't happen. It doesn't happen, or the influence you provided at that moment doesn't do anything after the fact. Are you being consistent with the ways you can influence? Your care, your positivity, your character, or your faith. Are you being consistent with those things? Seeing consistency in faith from people around me is actually what influenced me to give Christianity one last shot. I don't know if you've heard my faith story or not before, but kind of like a big part of it was I grew up in the church and I wasn't a big fan. And I also wasn't a big fan of faith in general. It just didn't make sense to me. It didn't fully align. There was just a lot of questions and doubts, and I just wasn't really into it. Well, one of the things as I got to a point where I was about to step away from my faith, I was thinking I need to maybe give my faith one more try. And one of the big things that brought me to that moment was seeing the consistency of the faith of my grandparents, actually. I got to see them have consistent faith through the highs and lows of life. My grandma and grandpa, they were so faithful to God. They were the most faithful people I knew. And my grandpa got cancer, and I still saw them be faithful. And my grandpa passed away, and I still got to see my grandma be faithful in that time. Their faith and consistency of faith is what brought me to continuing pursuing God and having faith today. Are you passing on that influence? That influence of consistency in faith. I think many of us wrestle with our family members or maybe friends feeling like they are just lost causes when it comes to faith. But consistency in the faith you are personally practicing might be the greatest influence you will have on them. So as we think about being unleashed in just a few weeks, are you going to sacrifice your comfort more? Are you going to capitalize on the right timing? Are you going to use the position you are in? And finally, are you going to be consistent in the faith that you have through your actions? Maybe right now is the first time you've even thought about using your influence and using your influence for God. And something in you is maybe stirring and saying you want to be a part of something bigger. You want to be a part of a story that's more than yourself. You want to be a part of the Moses story even. If that's you, know that God wants to give you direction on that. You can do that by being a part of God's family. And it starts by you saying in your head and your heart that you want a relationship with Jesus. It's saying, God, I want to be used for something bigger than myself. I want to be a part of your family. I want to be a part of your story. I'm not perfect. I've messed up a ton and I know you're perfect. But God, take me in and use me. Use my influence for something good and something bigger than myself. And when you say that in your head and your heart, even just inside, you are now on a path of faith with God. You're in a relationship with Jesus. You are a Christian. So as I close, I'm going to pray that if that's something you've never done, to maybe have your influence be used for God. And if you've already done that before too, I'm going to pray that we use our influence in a better, stronger, good way to lead more people to God and to make a difference in this world. If you want those things, you can pray with me right now. Dear Heavenly Father, I pray that as we talk about influence, God, some of us, this is the first time we even thought about using our influence for something bigger than ourselves. And God, we want that. We want to be a part of the Moses story. We want to continue that. So God, right now we're saying, take us, use our influence for good. And then God, some of us today are saying, we want to have you show us how we should use our influence for you. We want help in making a difference in this world, so prompt us in the right timing and just show us how we can do that well. Help us be influential as we're unleashed into the public and interacting with others. We want to be influential for you. In your name we pray, amen. Well, thank you for being a part of this service with us. We hope you enjoyed our Mother's Day fun and all the things that went into the service. Our mission of Centerpoint Church is to help you take the next step in developing your relationship with God. We also have a passion for reaching people who aren't connected to Jesus and maybe don't have a church home currently. If you want to support our mission, you can do so by going to centerpointfdl.com and you can go to the top menu bar and select the Give button. That would be a huge blessing to us to support what we are doing here in Fond du Lac. And then finally, we have a few quick announcements of things happening over these next couple of weeks. So next week, we're going to have some giveaways as part of our service, so you don't want to miss that. And then we also have some really great things happening during the week. So we have like a fishing seminar, we have a Bible class coming up. We're also doing midweek gatherings through Zoom meetings. So check out all those things on our Facebook page. Again, thanks for being a part of this service with us, and happy Mother's Day. Have a great Sunday.